Hello everybody, welcome to the newest episode of MAFF'S Movie Show. I'm your host, as always, Mr. Magoo, and this week in our Spidey movie marathon, we are talking about The Amazing Spider-Man, the one that released in 2012, the first reboot of the whole Spider-Man character. We got Andrew Garfield in the fray, and it's actually a really good cast. It's directed by Mark Webb, who, if you do not know, he is a man who directed 500 Days of Summer, one of the most enjoyable rom-coms, and also a rom-com that really changed the game, especially back then. People have opinions on it, but back in 2009, that was a really big movie, and Sony was like, you know, his last name is Webb, and we want a director who knows how to have interconnecting relationships and communication that feels relatable between young stars and leads, and this guy knows how to do that, so get him on board. He's perfect. When I saw this in theaters, I actually really liked it. And I tossed back and forth with it because I think it has a lot of elements that make a great movie, but it doesn't exactly come together. Some elements that have stayed consistent for me, watching it over the past 9 years. What? One, the cast. Andrew Garfield is, no matter what you think about it, the iteration of the character in this and the next movie, I think he is great. His acting talents are astronomical. If you haven't seen Tick, Tick, Boom, really solid movie, but he is the reason why you really watch that with Lin-Manuel Miranda's direction, because Andrew Garfield is one of the most talented actors out there. Two, the music by James Horner. It's wild, it's audacious, it's outrageous. James Horner, rest his soul, does a really great job of blending what we know James Horner for, if you've seen like Titanic and like Avatar. His versatility, the way he incorporates a lot of instruments, a lot of chanting, just a lot of random types of instruments that he incorporates into a lot of these scenes. Even though I don't always agree with his sonic choices, I think it rocks. And most importantly for me, number 3 is the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone as Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy in this movie. They got Mark Webb, the guy who made 500 Days of Summer, as I mentioned before, a guy who was really known for making relatable characters in a real relationship feel real in that movie, and it translates here beautifully. And I'm sure the sexual chemistry seemed off the charts for these two. They dated, and it makes perfect sense. You watch this movie and you're like, oh yeah, you can tell from the moment that they met each other in their screen tests that they were going to find a way to date each other. It's the way they look at each other, the way they interact with each other, the way they talk to each other, the way they just do nothing, the way they do everything, script or not. Like, when you watch scenes with them together in this movie, if there was a way to allow dogs to speak English, if you put a collar on it that allowed it to speak English, if you put a dog in front of a TV and let that dog watch these two speak and interact with each other, the dog would be like, oh yeah, woof, woof, they're totally having sex. And I think the way that Mark Webb and these actors portray this relationship really lends to what happens in the next movie being very impactful, whether or not you agree with how it happens or the reason or blah, 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 like the storytelling mechanics of it. I think, like, they make this movie very relatable, and they make it a lot easier to watch because you enjoy watching them on screen, even if you don't like superhero shit. From there, it's messy. I think The Amazing Spider-Man is a movie that has really interesting ideas, but doesn't really know how to really translate everything in a way that's memorable or impactful or really leaves an impression, so to speak. I think it does a really good job of separating itself from the first 3 movies. I think it does a really good job of being its own thing, even though we'll get to it, even though the tone completely changes in the next movie. And I really don't care at this point at my age about comic book accuracy. I just want a good movie, and I really just want the essence of the character to shine through. And I think Tobey Maguire in his own way did that, thanks to Sam Raimi's portrayal. But I think Andrew Garfield's portrayal, he is more of a quippy Spider-Man. I think he has more personality, so to speak, a more colorful personality, but he also has a lot more vulnerability because I feel like Andrew Garfield does a lot better of a job than Tobey Maguire in expressing emotion. The first 2 scenes I think of are the scene where he argues with Uncle Ben before he leaves and then he gets shot, and the scene at the end where he tells Emma Stone, Gwen Stacy, that he can't see her anymore because of the promise that he made to her dying dad after the lizard basically mauls him before he dies. A lot of what I love about Peter Parker as a character is just the heavy guilt that weighs upon him for absolutely everything, and I love seeing that personified in these movies. But I think in this movie they do a really good job of showing us Andrew Garfield's plight with being this superhero character and what it really means for the people around him. But then you have these missed opportunities with the untold story with his dead parents who were secret agents or spies or something. We don't really know. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's all just set up for things that never really come to real fruition, in my opinion. Same thing with Uncle Ben's killer. We have a little moment of rage and some sort of vengeance for Peter Parker after the death of Uncle Ben, which I think is a botched scene too, in the way they kill Uncle Ben. It kind of happens really quickly, and there's no real impact in that moment. But that doesn't really go anywhere either with the blonde-haired Hulk Hogan dude with the star tattoo on his wrist. He searches for him for like 5 minutes, and then he just gives up on it. The way all this meshes together too, the editing seems a little rushed and choppy. Like, there's no consistency or coherency with how they're telling the story. It annoys me that I want to get invested in everything, but some things just don't work to its full potential, where it just leaves me feeling high and dry. Like the scene where he first uses his powers in the subway car. It's cute, but like, it's okay. It's whatever. The scene where he first comes home and he like catches the fly in front of Aunt May. I love that scene. The scene where he first actually puts on the suit and saves all those people in the cars and saves that kid in the other car and brings him back to his father, and he says, "I'm Spider-Man." I love that scene. The scene at the school where he fights Dr. Connors as the Lizard. Some good CGI, a really great Stan Lee cameo, but I can care less about that actual action sequence. The ending where he has to use the cranes to get to Oscorp Tower to fight the Lizard with Captain Stacy. Even though the swinging looks kind of weird, like the frame rate is choppy when he swings. I don't know what happened there, but I like that scene. I like that moment. And the actual fight on the Oscorp Tower, I actually like that too. And when Captain Stacy dies, they mute out Andrew Garfield's scream a little bit, so it's like it sounds like he's underwater when he screams, while James Horner's score is blasting in the background to like emphasize his pain. That's one of my like probably top 5 moments of the entire movie for me in that moment. Death in movies and death in entertainment can be used as a cheap trick to elicit and manipulate emotion. But death is a big component in the life of Peter Parker. The actual death of Dennis Leary's Captain Stacy, but the moment that the conversation that he has with Peter Parker before he dies, and then Peter Parker reacting to his death, I think is beautiful. It shows the real tragedy of Peter Parker as a character in a way that I love seeing that shit. Dr. Kurt Connors, the Lizard, as the villain is fine. Would I have liked to rather have seen Dylan Baker from the Raimi movies as the Lizard? Yes. Do I like Rufus Ifans as a character? Yes. Do I think there were missed opportunities with showcasing where he was coming from in wanting to turn everybody into lizards at the end of the movie? Yes. It's like I fight back and forth with it, because I think his relationship with Peter does come through in those earlier scenes. For me, the visual aesthetic of the Lizard in this movie, the lab coat thing they had in the comics, it's cool in the moment. I don't need it. But the way they created the Lizard look, I understand, to give him a more humanized face, to evoke more emotion from that character. If you give him more of a snout like a lizard actually has, I guess you can't really express the emotions the way you want to for that character when he has moments to speak. But it just looks awkward. But then a lot of my weird issues and nitpicks with the character are saved by moments like at the end where he saves Andrew Garfield from falling off the building, and while he's doing it, the arm that he grew back because he was missing an arm, and a lot of it was him trying to get his arm back, regenerate it. When he loses his arm again at the end, the arm that he used to save Peter Parker in that moment, and you feel the pain in him in that moment, and you're like, oh, this is the kind of stuff I want more of. You can't have everything, I guess. My biggest takeaway from The Amazing Spider-Man is that it's a movie that I didn't need, but I'm glad that this movie exists in the next one for the sole purpose that we got Andrew Garfield as the character. And there are scenes I like, scenes I don't like. It's just a mishmash of ideas that don't really always work. But I think what they were going for, like, there's a really good movie in this fine movie. I will leave this re-review with a final note regarding a scene that I slightly touched on earlier with Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker, where she shows up at his doorstep because he didn't show up at her father's funeral. And she basically calls him out on it, but she realizes, oh, did he tell you to promise to not see me because you're Spider-Man? Which she finds out in this movie, which I thought was also a big surprise when I first saw this. Like, oh, she already knows. But it's a really poignant and awesome scene for me. Like the rain in the background, the expressions on both of their faces, and like he's trying so hard to be like, I want to be with you, but I can't. If I do get with you, there's a good chance that you'll end up like your dad, dead. And he refuses to tell her this. He keeps it internalized, but she's smart. She figures it out. Like, oh yeah, you talked to my dad about this before he died. That, yeah. What I find funny about this scene is that this incredibly emotional moment transpires, but Emma Stone, like, she knew what she was doing. She comes to the apartment looking cute as a button. She looks adorable, and she knows it. She's like, I'm gonna get Peter Parker back. So that scene happens, and then Aunt May talks to Peter Parker, and like immediately after this moment, he shows back up at the school behind Gwen Stacy and basically insinuates to her dead dad, you know what, screw you. I don't care what I told you before you died. I'm still getting with your daughter. The power that Emma Stone holds over people. Relatable. Relatable. Emma Stone, Gwen Stacy, has a crush on you, sees that you need friends, starts talking to you, and agrees, even though you stumble your way through a conversation and you don't know how to close the deal, still offers and accepts a date with you, becomes your girlfriend. You are now dating Emma Stone, and then all this stuff happens, and then you know what you have to do after that, after her dad dies. She shows up on your doorstep looking the way she does, crying her big, adorable eyes out, and that's the moment where you're like, how am I just gonna, like, let this opportunity go by? I love this girl. Ugh! Sorry, Dennis Leary. My teenage hormones are going through the roof. I have to date your daughter.
Leave Gwen out of it.
And that's it for The Amazing Spider-Man. I want to know from all you boys and girls, though, what do you think of this movie? Let me know in the comments down below. Has your tune changed on it over the years? Anybody who's still here and watching, thank you for your support. If you haven't already, you could like the video, you could subscribe and ring the bell. You know what to do. Let's talk about the movie down below. Next week is The Amazing Spider-Man 2, one of the most important movies in my life. If you know me, you know why already. I've said it 100 times. If you don't know, if you're new here, I'll re-explain myself next week. Yeah, see you guys soon. Have a good, safe week. Have a happy Thanksgiving if you're celebrating Thanksgiving. Thank you again. Love all of you. See you soon. Bye-bye.